Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. So, Rob, great to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, no, delighted to be part of this.
Well, I've very excited to reach out to people that I either know or have something's just happened that I'm interested in, and you're somebody I know, and something's happened that I'm interested in, which we'll get to in just a second. But just to introduce yourself to listeners, Rob, just tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Rob Oxley. I'm head of the HR team for the UK business of John Siskin Son Limited. We're an Irish family-owned building contractor with about 2,500 employees across the group.
Okay, and I saw on LinkedIn, which is where I seem to spend a ridiculous amount of time just sort of mooching and looking at things, that CISC had achieved the Platinum IIP certification, so the investors in people. And that just immediately triggered a kind of, I would love to have a conversation just about what it means and I guess the journey to it. So with that in mind, Rob, was IIP something that you already had? Was it a journey from the start? Were you kicking off from already being a bronze or a silver or something along those lines? Just, where did it start, and what was the catalyst to say, let's go for that next level?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's been a long journey and a really positive journey, I would say, over the last, 12 to 15 years. So I joined CISC back in 2012. We'd already kind of started engagement in the year or two prior to me joining, and we'd secured basically IIP accreditation at just a standard level. I say just a standard level, but that's the kind of entry point really where you first start the journey. And I guess it's really kind of gone bananas since then, really, in a really positive way. We've got the same assessor, a chap called Bruce McRae. He's great fun, and he has this amazing ability of unlocking conversations with our people, which means that one of the great things and the reasons why we continue to invest in investors in people is because we get Bruce as well, and Bruce comes into our organisation every 3 years when we go through the accreditation process. He does a little interim check halfway through as well to check we're making progress and to kind of challenge us along the way. But he knows the organisation fantastically well. So it's that external validation point of having someone come into the organisation, stick their nose in, speak to 100 people, ranging from document controllers, office managers to regional directors to our CEO, to get really under the skin of what we do. And that's kind of why we continue, I think, is that it gives us a really good flavour as to how our people and culture strategy is actually landing in the organisation. There's one thing, us being able to, I guess, run employee engagement surveys ourselves, but there's an entirely other thing when you're bringing someone external from outside the organisation in to really have a good lift up of that bonnet and have a check as to how things are going.
So this is this kind of, if nothing else, even if it wasn't IIP, there's something massively valuable about you can't see the back of your own head, and having just an external person come in and, I guess, give a line of sight on things.
Definitely. And it's just through a series of different interventions. We do a self-assessment up front, which we kind of basically provide evidence as to where we feel we meet the standards and the indicators that are set out in IIP. And then Bruce effectively goes into the business. We run a survey, and all our employees across the UK business will respond. And then Bruce will take the themes from the survey and the self-assessment that we do, and then validate that, or not, as the case may be, in one-to-one interviews across a number of our different projects. So it does exactly that. It enables us to get under the skin of the initiatives that we're rolling out from centre, from HR, that we desperately need people's buy-in, but it actually tells us, is this actually landing? And Bruce's conversations enable that to us to get that realisation, I guess.
So it feels like a to some respects, an audit, and I guess a kind of a diagnostic all in one. Is it something then that does it require conscious thinking over that 3-year period leading up to this that says, actually, in fact, let me word that better, does knowing that you're doing IIP affect the way that you work?
I would say no, because what I've found incredibly valuable about going through the IIP process actually is the reflection piece. We're very good in our organisation, and I think organisations generally are very good at this, of reacting and moving on and looking forward rather than back. We don't reflect on our past triumphs, if you want to call it that, the success stories. And one of the great things about the accreditation process, because of the fact it comes every 3 years, it provokes you to look back as well as looking forward. And what didn't land? Why didn't it land? Since the last time we spoke to Bruce, the last time he came into the organisation, so we can get to see and hear, where perhaps we can tweak our approach and then kind of take a step forward. But I don't. It doesn't shape the way we operate. Absolutely not. Bruce comes in, he tests, he understands, he seeks to understand from us within the HR team and the wider business the things that we're trying to roll out, and then just gives us a really honest view across a number of those, the structure, the kind of pillars of the invest in people model, where we are stacking up and whether it's where we think we are or actually there's a slightly different story.
So you're getting a kind of red, amber, green almost on, we think we're doing X, Y, and Z, but actually this is an independent person that says, yes, that action that you think is creating that impact, it is, all the way through to and if you are, I can't see it, or I actually don't know if you are. So do you get to evidence something that maybe he hasn't picked up on, or do you sometimes realise, oh, blimey, that's a really good observation, we haven't hit the mark there, or actually, no, I think we are, but we just haven't maybe shown you that? How does that kind of play out?
Well, there's all of that, actually, that goes on. So Bruce will prod and poke. I provide a good chunk of data to validate what I think is where we are and the progress we're making. He won't just take it as though the data points I'm providing him are, this is the way it's landing within the business. He will then prod and poke senior leaders. He'll check for consistency in terms of the way the message is being told, the story is being kind of shared, and whether it's a lived and breathed experience out on our projects. And we've got a number of positive indicators. You wouldn't think we get to investors in people platinum status without having some real demonstrable change in our people and culture strategy and having delivered things. But actually, his kind of these questions really get us to unpick, and it lets him unpick why perhaps some of our initiatives haven't landed quite as we would have liked. And you come back to us with there's absolutely light bulb moments each time he comes back following a review, and we sit down and we talk, and he very clearly can articulate where perhaps some of the barriers to some of our kind of strategies are and how we might overcome them. And there's a conversation, it's a free-flowing conversation. It makes it sound like it's a once every 3 years gig. It's a bit more than that, and we kind of test our progress with him along the way. And the other thing I'd just quickly say as well, which is really important actually, is we bring him into some of our into some of our key activities through the year. So for example, we have roadshows which roll out every year. Our CEO, the senior leadership team, and a myriad of other people stand up, talk, and we have a two-way conversation. We get inputs from all of the other employees that are in attendance. Great feedback mechanism. He comes into those, so he hears the stories that our senior leaders are saying and telling, and then he can, when he's assessing, he can really understand, whether that's actually becoming a reality.
So that's quite useful, isn't it? Rather than the show pony of, right, he's coming to do a visit, him having more of a finger on the pulse for the
That's it.
genuineness of and the reality of, as opposed to, right, I'm here for a finite amount of time, the king thinks the world smells of paint kind of thing, because there's somebody 3 feet ahead of him, painting everything. So it kind of, that helps him trust or know the reality of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the fact he's kind of reaching out to everybody and anybody in the business, we don't choose who he speaks to. He'll obviously speak to some of the kind of the key influential people, like the CEO, the COO, the business unit managing directors, some of our quite influential people in our support functions. He'll always talk to those individuals, but we can't select who within our business he goes and meets on a site. So it's a really, it could be anybody and everybody that he speaks to, which gives us it's not, you can't hide, you can't try and frame this. And that I think makes it an even more kind of validating type of process, that you know that what's coming from is the truth.
Do you have a sense of what better question. I used to edit me not asking good questions out, but I've decided to just leave them in, so it's okay just to course correct as you go. So in terms of the senior team, getting them on board, easy to do at the start? Yeah, they were already there, or actually, you know what, no, there might be a few people that need a bit of convincing that this is something to put some energy into?
Definitely. Initially, I would say a little bit of a challenge, but once Bruce, and obviously you'd expect with most organisations, people leave. So while you may have had a massive advocate in the boardroom 1 year, that person may depart, and you've got to kind of influence another set of stakeholders, which can be quite challenging. But I think when they meet Bruce and they hear his story and the way he's kind of built up his knowledge over the years, very, very quickly, he can put into a very simple language, through his knowledge of and experience of our organisation, why his role in this process and why IIP is so important to us. Now, there's obviously benefits to the organisation from a retention perspective, from an attraction perspective, in terms of potential employees seeing this badge that we have, but that's not really the reason we do this. It also helps from a work winning perspective. So, when we go into tenders and we're submitting our work winning kind of proposals, it absolutely helps having the Investors in People Platinum badge, but that's not really that's not the motivator for this. The motivator for this is, as I've explained, is very much seeing, is our people and culture strategy landing? What else can we do that we haven't got our eyes on? It might be something over here that's making a bit of noise that we weren't aware of, that's stopping us, or a blocker or a barrier that we need to unlock. And that's not coming from a badge. That's coming from Bruce and from his views of how we're landing things in the organisation.
So you're not chasing an award. So I've won awards when I've done delivery with my programs, and you can't. And I will sometimes get clients go, I'd like to win an award. I go, well, I hear you, but don't chase it. Let's do something that we're proud of, that we think's awesome, and then we'll see where we are, and we'll then we'll look at entering an award. So the motivation's got to be there. So I hear that, and it feels as if there's lots of outputs from it that add value. If I'm looking to join, I go, if they've got IIP, that does mean something. If I'm looking to give you business, it says culturally you've got to be at a certain level. So if you were going to, and it's not differentiate between all levels because people can Google it, but what is Platinum saying that some of the other levels might not be?
Platinum is basically saying that we are, across their indicators, performing exceptionally strongly, and that we do this self-assessment at the start point where we kind of say that we think we're platinum status, and these are all the areas where we think we're succeeding, and we have to evidence that. High performing to me, which is what is effectively their top bar across those 9 indicators, it covers a wide kind of breadth of of topics such as leadership, such as living your values, such as innovation, not sitting still. And that's the thing that perhaps I haven't touched on, is the fact that we've retained platinum status. So we actually became platinum back in 2021. So it's even harder. And my understanding is to hold on to that status once you've got it, because it means obviously you have to show continuous improvement. You can't just rest on your laurels. So I guess, it's a real broad church of a model with those 9 indicators that means that the values have got to be lived and breathed. They've got to be role modeled by your senior leaders. You've got to constantly be evolving, thinking, looking ahead, and as an organisation showing that you're not necessarily, and not everything has to be leading edge here. At CISC we like to think we're fairly progressive, but it doesn't mean that you have to be on the forefront of every single HR initiative that's coming out the traps. But what you do is actually impacting, and actually your people are talking about the workplace as somewhere they really want to be, and they're generally excited about it. And I think things like talent management, succession planning, providing really clear, not just means of tracking individuals, but what are we actually doing with those individuals that's helping them progress? What opportunities are we presenting to them on the back of, let's say, doing some succession planning processes? And then thinking to ourselves, well, okay, we had a people and culture strategy which we were launching 3 years ago. I think the difference now, if we come on 3 years, is the way that we're trying to get, for example, our senior leaders to buy into that strategy. So we've taken a completely different approach to that. And again, that's borne out through one of the indicators, is around how understood is our strategy more broadly across the business, and how deeply is it understood? So from a leadership perspective, it needs to cascade. And we've invested the last 3 years, I would say, in terms of really moving into continuing that journey in high performing, I would say is absolutely largely down to how we have brought our senior leaders along the journey in terms of driving our strategy and then cascading ownership within the business.
I'm really interested in that. There's a lot of fads in any industry, in any market, in any place. It's easy to get sucked into the newest thing. But there is, if you do any sort of sport, what generally happens is the people that are excellent aren't doing clever things. They're doing basics really, really well. They understand the foundations of what they're doing. And so there's something here. What I'm hearing is, we might pay attention, of course, to what's going on in the world, but actually don't be overpowered by the newest thing. Actually, if you're going to drive it into the business, make sure that people have understood it, they can work with it, they can use it. It's actually part of their language. It's not just a course that they've been on. It's transferred into their vocabulary, which would be an indicator that it's real. All of these kind of things, which in theory, somebody once said to me, actually, Guy, the complexity is in the simplicity.
Sorry, I've lost a bit of...
That's all right. No, you hadn't moved, so your light went. Brilliant. Oh dear. So no, I think that's really true. I come across this all the time, and I get it sometimes when I'm going to do delivery for somebody in an organisation, and they go, well, what's new? I go, well, we could have that conversation, but before we get to what's new, are your people doing the things that are actually, in essence, just required? And I think that's probably the biggest thing. Let's not do handbrake turns in the car if your people can't park it yet.
And I think that's a really great point, because if I go back when I first joined about 12 years ago, we're probably not that dissimilar to many other organisations in the construction sector. And I use this as hopefully quite a good example. People generally have got promoted at CISC historically through technical competence, technical brilliance. And we've got very highly skilled, hugely talented civil engineers and quantity surveyors and building services managers in this business who have done fantastically well, driven projects incredibly well, got fantastic output, incredible legacy. But one thing they never had, and that's on us, is we've not tooled them up to be a manager or a leader. And so about 2017, I think it was 2017, 2018, if I remember correctly, myself and one of my colleagues developed a management leadership development program. That's where you and I actually first met, Guy. But we basically realised that the technical competence piece wasn't an issue. It's really all about, now as people progress, they need those interpersonal skills. They need to be able to manage people and understand what good looks like and bad looks like in this space. And we went through this massive exercise, big gap analysis, going through performance review ratings and scores to identify the gaps. Built the program, 3 tiers called Elevate, Management Leadership Development Program, Manage for first-line managers, Lead for kind of middle managers, and Inspire for senior leaders. And we pushed through a number of cohorts each year, which ultimately is bridging that gap. It's helping our managers and leaders that have been self-appointed through technical brilliance to come up to that level, to have equally strong people skills. Now, the reason I say this in relation to investors and people is, number one, that's a great evidence of us, looking at a real gap in our armoury, addressing a critical issue, which was retention at the time, and putting the focus on the line managers who play such a critical part in that whole employee experience. For me, that old adage of line manager, people leave line managers, I firmly believe that. And so that's the Elevate program. I think it's been a great story for us, and we're continually evolving it. It's one of the things that, from an investors and people kind of perspective, it's not particularly radical in its thinking or its structure. And you could probably go into other organisations that have management leadership programs, and you see something relatively similar. But I would say it's actually made a huge difference in terms of our culture, where people are starting to prioritise, or certainly prioritising, the importance of their interrelationships with people. And that ultimately feeds our culture of care, which is one of our 3 values, which is where people feel that they're invested in, they've got that level of support around them. And also our philosophy of a no limits career, where ultimately it doesn't matter where you are in the organisation, you can look to be a better form of yourself, whether you're a document controller or you're climbing the hierarchy to become the next CEO. All of that in that program, what that enables us to do is a manager to have a simple conversation, a check-in, a more frequent dialogue, whether it's about someone's career, whether it's about their well-being. And that's what we feel really creates the right environment and the right culture for people to want to flourish and just to come into work and enjoy themselves.
There's so much there, really. One of the things I hear there is, when HR is great, it doesn't dictate, it enables, and it sees, I wouldn't say just sees gaps, but it works with the organisation to say, where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? Okay, where's it easy? Where's it hard? Where's it not working? What can we do that can make that easier? And as you say, putting a leadership development program in, that's not really the issue technically. You can just go and say, hey, but of course it's got to be the right kind of content, the right kind of facilitation team. It's got to resonate with people in terms of a language that they understand. They've got to feel as if the rest of the business is paying attention to it. It's not just a training course. It's actually something that has a strategic imperative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all little jigsaw pieces that independently each one of them's fine, but if they all connect up to a purpose, then you're getting great HR. You're actually feeling, well, it's not really HR, is it? It's just something I need. It's not, et cetera, et cetera. It's not being done to me. It's not a requirement. Yeah. I mean, yes, it is, but at the same time, actually, gosh, I'm glad I went on it. And then all of these things. So I was going to ask you a question actually about where you see IIP in the business, but really that's not it, is it? It's really where IIP sees the business doing what it does best and sees what's going on, and actually it aligns it to some indicators of what good looks like. So it's not that you're installing IIP, it's that you're doing good work, and IIP is referencing what good looks like, and then is able to say to you, almost as, you know, from that lens, yeah, we can see that actually you're hitting those points. I think I've just reflected on that, and that's where I've got to with I don't know if I've understood that correctly, but I think
you definitely have, and that's exactly it. So we don't sit here every 3 years, wait for Bruce to roll in, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong, and then hold ourselves up, and use the IIP model as a map to our success. That's just not what we do. Now, IIP may not prefer me not to say that, but what it does is it gives us that stamp that we feel we need to give us validation that we're genuinely making progress in our people and culture strategy. That's what's really important, and that CISC is a great place to work. That's fundamentally what our drivers are. It's not to get another shiny badge to stick on our email signature. It's really all about validating everything that we think of what we're doing internally, and actually giving us some external kind of verification that yes, we're on the right path. We're definitely on the right path.
So somebody once said to me, it's really hard to stay still in fast-moving water, which I think is a great phrase. And I didn't realise actually that you'd already got platinum and that you'd maintained it. So it's a little bit like a Michelin star and then having to keep it, right? That's the way I'm looking at it. I have to put everything into something a bit more simple so I can stay.
Like that.
But that's it, isn't it? Because, you know, it's like a, you know, world champion athlete getting to the level, getting there. I mean, kudos and tick, maintaining it, staying at that level. Well, really, that's the challenge, isn't it? You know, to maintain it, and that's also factoring in that the organisation isn't static, the market isn't static, the population isn't static. So it's not just press repeat, is it?
No, not at all. And I think that's something that's probably more of a nod to both our HR team and the wider organisation. And when I say that, I also say we're quite an agile organisation for an organisation that's been around since 1859. You know, there are certain roles that have basically, because of innovation, because of the changing world of technology within construction, that have cropped up over the last 3-5 years. It's a very different place, construction now, to where it was 3 to 5 years ago. And our board, very forward thinking, when it came to, we've got a breaking new ground strategy, which is coming into its 3rd year of existence now. And the people and culture strategy is one of 5 strands within the breaking new ground strategy. But when the genesis of the breaking new ground strategy was absolutely forward-looking, thinking what are the big 5 areas that we really need to focus on, looking externally. It was a brilliant piece of work, and actually very visionary from our CEO, Paul Brown. He basically identified and crossed a number of those indicators from an IIP perspective when he set about developing this breaking new ground strategy. We had 5 themes, and he attached a working group to each one of those 5 themes with responsible leads from across the business attached to those five strategic themes. Myself and one of my colleagues, Brendan Morris, we were responsible leads for the people and culture strategy. And just by way of example, we then took that project, no pre-existing views from anybody about how we would say it's a 3-year strategy. Go away, Rob and Brenda, pull together a working group, develop a strategy, and looking outwards, looking inwards, spoke to nearly 40% of our whole organisation through surveys and focus groups, spoke to the family members, went externally, spoke to some clients, spoke to competitors, spoke to forward-thinking organisations, spoke to their HR teams, pulled in this took a 9-month period, pulled all of this in, came up with a proposed strategy, got it validated by the construction board, and then into what they call the SciComm board, which has got family members and non-execs. And long story short, that became our strategy for the next 3 years. Now, multiply that up by the 5 different pillars of our breaking new ground strategy, and you've got 5 responsible leads or pairs of who are in the succession plan. So you're giving visibility to people who are essentially going to be potentially future leaders in the organisation to the board and the wider organisation, which is great. Huge stretch for those individuals as well. So again, from an investors in people perspective, you're putting a spotlight on some people who are growing in the organisation. You're giving them real tangible responsibility for the future of the business, and you're giving them visibility so that their kind of progression is being. So it's just an example, Guy, I guess, where some of the forward-thinking thoughts of our CEO and our board has cascaded into, and when you layer on the investors in people accreditation to that ticks, I mean, probably 9 of the 9 indicators in terms of that body of work itself, because it's got those threads woven through it as a project as a whole. So, sorry, that was a long answer, but
no, I think it's great, because when I listen to people talk, I think one of the things is I try to understand is whether or not somebody applied a formula, which is, sometimes, there is a process to a thing, of course, but also whether or not it's a passion. And generally speaking, a passion and a formula get you going in the right direction. Because if you're passionate with no formula, good luck. And you got a formula but no passion, let me know how it works out for you. So when I hear those two things flowing at the same time, and what I really hear is that as an organisation, there's something going on about this being very real, this whole dynamic of, we're a commercial enterprise, we're not just here for the good of mankind, though, that's a beautiful thing. But at the same time, people, and all of those things that are very easy to talk about. Very often, I think the indicator that it might not be quite as healthy as you would think is when they're all independent activities, which generally tells me it's a tick box exercise. Now, that can be doing a little bit of a disservice to good work done in independent areas. But then at the very least, it's not a kind of tribe. It's not a hive mind mentality. It's not that, okay, this is what we're about. And that then shifts, I think, when people come into contact with an organisation. I think people can tell independent activity, which means process competence, and that's not a bad thing. But no, this is what we're about. And I think that's what you've just described.
I think that's a nicely summarised version of what I've said. And I think, we don't do things in isolation, which I think is something that we used to do maybe 5-10 years ago. If you were to take a lens through CISC, you'd probably see little bits of initiatives going on here, a few initiatives over here, not very well linked, no kind of overall strategy across it. And that's one of the great things I'd say. So I mentioned the Breaking New Ground strategy, that was the 5 pillars, the five kind of strategic priorities. Well, we didn't do those in isolation. We had regular catch-ups with all of the responsible leads to make sure that there were what were the synergies, what consistencies, how are we going to communicate this plan, how are we going to embed it, and that enables exactly what you're talking about. It enables the interconnectivity between all of those activities. So it's a seamless approach, one kind of comms, one brand almost internally through Breaking New Ground, and it prevents that isolation or pockets of independent activity, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that means when somebody comes in, either as a new member of the team or as an independent observer, they're hearing they're seeing that kind of unified approach. Therefore, you interviewed me for the job and you said it would be like this, and when I come in, it is. And actually, as an external observer, when I come into, for the want of a better word, audit, it's clearly not a facade. And maybe, without knowing, because I haven't done the IIP, but maybe that's one of those platinum things, which is maybe the difference between platinum and gold is the fact that it's embedded. It's the vocabulary. It's maybe not fundamentally a differential, but by golly, these so-and-sos are living it, breathing it, because actually all the things we've just spoken about.
And I'm sure there are organisations that Bruce and others go into, other assessors for IIP go into, and you get the big kind of facade up front from an HR person or someone else within the business explaining, look, these are all the great things that we do. But if the assessor will see straight through that very, very quickly. And they can tell often, to your point, you mentioned the word passion, I think, earlier. And one of the things that's really important is that people can put their own language to this, and we talk about this breaking new ground strategy, but that's one of the things that's really important is everyone has like an elevator pitch basically, so they can articulate what this strategy is, whether it's internally or externally. So it produces this very consistent drumbeat of what are we trying to achieve here, and the vernacular, the language that people use is very similar, but has their own personal sways, to it, which makes it quite impactful, I'd say.
Yeah, and the more people talk about it, the more language becomes normalised and people aren't uncomfortable with the vocabulary. And I think you can tell when somebody's saying it because they've been told to. And the fact that it's in your natural parlance, it is in the way that you consider things. So that would again be a key indicator straight away between, well, you clearly know what you're saying, but it doesn't feel as if it's you saying it. And I think there's a difference between those.
But I think there is, and I think if I think about even how we've managed to get that breaking new ground strategy to stick within the organisation and really for people to buy into it, it's about incentivising people to really get on board as well. So when I say that, we've launched last year as part of the people and culture strategy some torchbearer awards, which are basically recognition awards done by a business unit to show where people have to put forward a case individually and as a team, where they've lived and they've breathed and they've driven one of our strands, one of our 5 strategic priorities, and they've showcased it. Now, what then comes on the back of that is for the individuals is a nice 4-figure award. But the big thing for me, 2 big things are, one is sat in front of their peers at these roadshows. Their name is put up in spotlights. Their message is articulated about what they've driven. So loads of peer recognition, which is brilliant. Then the next piece, which is most people would say is a real positive thing. Some may say they'd be less keen on it. Was a day with our construction board at the end of the year, where they got to spend a day on one of our projects and then in a room with our construction board members talking about various different things around the strategy and having a voice. So we're thinking very carefully about how people own the message, how they articulate in their own language, running workshops to help them to do that and understand it, reporting on progress so that people understand that we are making meaningful change here. And we're recognising people who are actually showcasing, and really role modelling the torchbearers of our strategy in itself. So, I don't know, it's kind of woven in, as I said before, it's woven into a lot of different things that we do to make it part of our fabric.
It's a beautiful thing. It is. I can see it and I can feel it. And I think that's lovely for me to see. I'm in this space. It is very easy to come across HR communities where it is not a passion; it is an administrative function, and people are submissive to senior. I don't mean being in service and of service, but they're submissive to just the obedience of being, in essence, an administrator, which is very different to what you're talking about, which is being a true peer-level business partner, where actually what we're doing is we can actually say that we are an absolutely relevant piece of the success of this organisation. As in we are, we're one of those jigsaw pieces. And we can see how it, and I think that's amazing to see. So just, I'm alert to time, and one of the things I always say on these podcasts, with a bottle of wine and a pizza, I keep you talking for the whole evening to the point where you said I want to go home. So if I was an HR lead and I was looking at IIP, any top tips, any kind of mental notes to self, or listen, having ridden this horse before, if you're trying to go on that journey, is a few things to think about?
Yeah, I think number one, and you probably got from my earlier comments, it is not a short-term thing. So, to really get the benefit of the kind of validation process, you desperately want to get the same assessor, point one. Bruce is brilliant, by the way. Big plug for him. But
I'll put a link to Bruce in the description of the podcast. I feel he should have a link to his LinkedIn, which I've already seen him on LinkedIn, but I will link to him.
He's brilliant, but I suppose all I'm saying is that regardless of who the assessor is, to have that over a period of time and commit not just to a 3-year window, the value comes. Fine, the first 3 years is great; it'll give you a view, but it's then building up that bank of knowledge in the assessor so they can understand the journey that you as a business are going on, so that they can comment clearly about the progress the demonstrable progress that they can see and feel when they're in your organisation. So I would say stick with it and commit to it for a period of time. Other tips, I would say get close to the assessor and share everything. Don't give them the good news. Don't just give them the positives. Tell them some of the things that aren't working, some of the things that you've tried that perhaps failed, and because the assessor will pick that up when they go around. So there's no point trying to present a different situation. Just be straight up and use it as a process. Think about obviously you want a nice badge, don't get me wrong, but what's more important is that you get seize the opportunity to get some impartial, untempered advice and guidance from someone who knows what they're talking about and that's validated by your people. So, for me, go in with open eyes and being as brutally honest as you can be, because your people will be themselves. And then I would say celebrate it. So one thing that is really important is that thank obviously all the people who've invested their time in the process, because there's quite a few of them, but then celebrate the result at the end of the journey, whether it's whatever level of accreditation is. It's a heck of a process, and then it's really about how do you weave in the recommendations that come out of the other end. So don't just get the badge, tick the box, because we wouldn't have retained Invest in People status if we'd have just got the box, not listened to Bruce, and not taken his advice and recommendations on. Listen and act upon on the feedback that comes in your direction.
Perfect. So listen, Rob, I'm going to bring us to a close. I'm going to get you to stay on just for a few moments just to make sure everything uploads so you don't see a grown man cry in front of you if it all goes horribly wrong. So on that note, listen, just from everybody listening, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been hugely valuable for me, and it's just great to interact with somebody who actually is boots on the ground doing this kind of thing, and so that's, I think, a huge value. So from me and everybody else listening, Rob, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
That's it, so I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.